Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6 o'clock. We're going to bring this meeting to order. I'd like to bring to order the September 14, 2020 special meeting of the Sebastian City Council. This meeting is to discuss, actually to hold our first public hearing on the budget for fiscal year 2021. Please stand for a moment of silence. I just called to order a moment of silence and a pledge of allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is a public hearing. We're going to follow the public hearing rules. City Attorney Manny Anon is calling in on Zoom this evening. Roll call. And if he is there, the first step is for the City Attorney to advise the Council on procedures and millage budget hearing.
I do need roll call, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, excuse me, roll call. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mayor Dodd?
Here.
Vice Mayor Motti?
Present.
Councilmember Gilliams?
Here.
Councilmember Hill?
Here.
Councilmember Paris?
Here.
And excuse me.
All right, now,
Thank you.
the City Attorney, if you'd like to move forward. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. If at some chance you don't hear me because I'm having some kind of connectivity issue, just let me know and I'll call in. But okay, this is the first of two millage budget hearing meetings we have. Tonight you are dealing with tentative millage and tentative budget. During the next budget hearing, tentatively set for September 28th, 2020, of course, subject to Council's approval, you will be considering the final millage rate and final budget. This hearing is conducted in accordance with Florida Statute 200.065, which is the method of fixing millage. In subsection 2, season Charlie, reads in part, prior to the conclusion of the hearing, the governing body of the taxing authority shall amend the tentative budget as it sees fit, adopt the amended tentative budget, recompute its proposed millage rate, and publicly announce the percent, if any, by which the recomputed proposed millage rate exceeds the rolled back rate computed previously. That percent shall be characterized as a percentage increase in the property tax tentatively adopted by the governing body. Further, in subsection 2D Delta, it requires that all advertisement, the tentative millage and budget along with the final hearing date, in no event may the millage rate adopted exceed the adopted tentative millage. Further, in section 2, E as in Echo 1, indicates that these hearings, the first substantive issue discussed shall be the percentage increase in millage over the rollback rate necessary to fund the budget, if any, the specific purpose for which ad valorem tax revenues are being increased. During which such discussion, the governing body shall hear comments regarding the proposed increase and explain the reasons for the proposed increase over the rollback rate. The general public shall be allowed to speak and to ask questions prior to the adoption of any measures of the governing body. The governing body shall adopt its tentative and final millage rate prior to adopting its tentative final budget. So while I'm reading both of them here together today, the law requires that you must first consider the millage rate before the budget. Also, I just want a quick reminder, the same rules for the public input in accordance with the adopted resolution 2002 applies to these special meetings. Thus, public will be limited to 5 minutes, subject to any kind of modification per section A, B1. Also important to note in these times under section B3, it states that personal, pertinent, and slanderous remarks, political campaigning, and applauding are not permitted and may result in sanctions imposed by the chair, including expulsion from the meeting. So here today, you will be considering two resolutions, and if I can, I'll read them. First resolution for consideration is resolution number R 20-17, a resolution of the City of Sebastian, Indian River County, Florida, adopting a tentative millage of 2.9399 mills for the calendar year 2020, providing for conflict, providing for scrivener's error, and providing for an effective date. Next, you have resolution number 2018, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sebastian, Indian River County, Florida, adopting the tentative budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2020, and ending September 30, 2021. Making these appropriations for the payments of operating expenses, capital expenses, and for the principal and interest payments on indebtedness of the city in the city's general fund, special revenue funds, debt service fund, capital improvement fund, golf course fund, airport fund, and building department fund as provided for in Schedule A attached here too. Establishing authority of the city manager to implement the budget, providing for conflict, providing for scrivener's errors, and providing for an effective date. And nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. All right, City Manager, would you like to announce?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and member of council and the public. The millage rate at 2.9399 is 4.66% above the rollback rate. We'd also want you to consider in this the 3.1514 millage rate. We'll be talking about that. Ken's going to go through a detailed presentation on the budget, and that would be a 12.2% increase over rollback rate. The rollback rate of 2.8091 is not sufficient to maintain the current spending levels for general fund with no provisions, and none of this has provisions. The 2.9399 does not have provisions for employee wage increases, shortfalls of state revenues, and or any payments resulting from legal actions. So I wanted to expand on that just a little bit before I turn it over to Ken, or when you open it up for him to give his presentation. Is what everybody needs to understand is ad valorem taxes isn't the only thing that the city uses for revenue for general fund. So one of the biggest things we've seen is the cuts in the state revenue shares, which is what we intend to try to make up because we don't know what the uncertainty of that is. When it comes to our capital budget, we also are not sure what the differences are going to be in our DST funds. Those are a little easier to manage by readjusting projects, shortening up projects. We can reduce some of the roads that we're going to resurface or reconstruct with those funds. So there's things we can do with these dollars to fluctuate those. The things we don't have much control over is the revenue generated for general fund revenues to offset expenditures. And again, the 2.9399, which is a 4.66 increase over rollback, has no raises. It basically is a bare bones budget. The 3.1514, 12.2%, something to consider. And just for everyone's knowledge, you can always at the second budget hearing on the 28th go back down. You can't go back up. So this is not much different than the trim. We don't know if we'll have any additional information on the 28th, but it's something for council to consider revising this budget and this resolution to take into consideration a 3.1514.
Okay, let's do the budget overview.
Do you want to go through that before we ask any questions? That's fine.
Yeah, I think I've got kind of a layout that City Attorney laid out to make this thing fit everything. So we'll do the budget overview, then we'll open up to the public, and then the council will address the budget, and then we'll address each of the resolutions. Okay. So Ken, would you like to?
Okay, you got my PowerPoint? Good evening. The presentation I'm giving tonight is essentially what I presented to the Citizens Budget Advisory Board. And I'll go through basically some brief points that I think you need to consider tonight. As Paul referred to, the big area of revenues that we're concerned about is the state revenue sharing. Our other sources of revenue and our expenditure line items, since we originally drafted the budget, have not really changed to any significant basis. The other funds, the DST, the local option gas tax, and all the enterprise funds have not changed. And as was said, the state requires a public hearing for us to vote on the tentative millage and budget, which we're doing this evening. Focusing then again on the state revenue sharing, the July and August revenue sharing collections were only 20% less than they were last year, which is a little bit better than we had presumed back when we drafted the budget last July. They posted on their website our forecast that they, for all cities, and for us, they've only reduced their projection for next year by 10% over the current year projections that they had started with. As I told the budget committee, this is reassuring. It looks like recovery is in the estimates that the state is forecasting, but it also makes us be very cautious, because one thing they did is on their estimates this year for the first time, they added a statement that the estimates are based on the best available information, and local government officials should be very cautious and conservative in their budgeting for the upcoming fiscal year. They went on to say there's much uncertainty on how the effects of the global pandemic will impact state and local revenues for 2021. Also, we have to remember what they did to us this year. Back in the May and June payments for the current year, they reduced our monthly collections from approximately $60,000 to $20,000. Just out of the blue, they just said the monies were coming into the trust fund and that they were, as a precaution, going to reduce our allocation. My concern is, if they've done this to us this year, what will they do next year if collections drop off and aren't as they are projecting? So as I said, the estimates for other revenue sources seem pretty close to what we used in the draft budget. I'm thinking the reserves by the end of this year will be close to the $5 million. I don't know that they'll be at or above. There's a lot of uncertainty with our 2021 forecast because of the unknowns, the pandemic, and one-time revenue sources. And I wanted to point this out in particular because these one-time revenue sources mean we go into next year without expecting these amounts. Therefore, we're already in the hole. So when you start, if you consider using reserve funds and going in further, below the $5 million, plus you had about $300,000 here that are one-time revenues, we will have a major headache next year in trying to balance the budget without some kind of major increase. As City Manager mentioned, there's zero provided in the employees in the current draft budget. We feel like if we make any further cuts to our expenditures, that would actually affect service levels. Just pointing out again that it's difficult to replenish the reserves once we've started going down that path. And just a reminder on the uncertainties of the labor negotiations. There's still the hurricane season and any legal settlements that we're faced with. Of course, the future effect of the pandemic on revenues. Also to be noted is that the projections I've made for next year revenues, the utility taxes, the franchise fees, I'm assuming, or had assumed when we made those projections, that the 2021 revenues would be, back to the normal, that would be increasing between 4 and 5%, which we've experienced in the past number of years. So that is also a bit of concern. Just wanted to chart out for you the three possible millage rates. Of course, the rollback millage rate of 2.8091. With that, a homesteaded property of $200,000 would actually decrease in the amount of taxes they would pay. With a millage rate of 2.9399, which is the millage rate we had this current year, a $200,000 homestead would increase a total for the year of $6. As we said, the budget is balanced at the 2.9399, but there's no room for labor negotiations or some of the unknowns that we've mentioned. If you reach back and go with the millage rate that we had year before last, or year before this, it was 3.1514. In that case, the homesteaded property at $200,000 assessed taxable value would increase by $38. That would allow us some funds to apply towards labor negotiations, legal costs, or shortfalls in revenue accounts. And from a finance director's point of view, what it would be doing is increasing our revenue base as we go into next year and take care of the concerns we have about the one-time revenues. The Citizens Advisory Board did vote on August 31st to recommend the 3.1514. It's already been mentioned that what millage is adopted for the tentative rate tonight cannot be exceeded when we go to adopt the final budget. That's according to state statutes. Speaking towards the other funds of the city, besides the general fund, you have the special revenue funds that drive the capital improvement program. We are pleased that the capital improvement program is increasing from $23.2 million this year to a projected $27.6 million next year. So we think it's important economically to put those funds out there to be expended and hopefully help our the local economy. With enterprise funds, we've got no large concerns with the way we put the budgets together for the golf course or the building funds or the airport. The airport will be using DST funds to match some of the capital grants that we were applying for or expecting to get. All those, the golf course, airport, and building fund are covering all their operating and personnel costs, and they are able to pay back some of the interfund loans that have been made in the past. So at this point, I will turn it over and let the agenda proceed for your public hearings on the resolution and on the tentative millage and the tentative budget. And that's all I had to add.
All right, thanks. I'm going to open this up to the public, but I got one thing I'd like to ask. There's a gentleman that's got a campaign shirt on, and before you come up, if you choose to come up, would you go out in the back and flip that around, please? Because we have no campaign. I hate to be the bad guy in this, but it's really, we're really not supposed to do that. So if you're not going to come up and speak, that's fine, but if you are, go flip it around. So is there anyone from the public that would like to address us? You're first, sir.
Good evening, gentlemen. Council members, John Cristino, Southeast Sebastian. I spent today, second time, I watched the budget meeting. I respect the gentlemen on both sides of the issue. We've got a difficult year ahead of us. It's an unprecedented time. No one wants to raise taxes. Councilman Hill has been an advocate for keeping our taxes stable for years. I, for one, am afraid of a message that we might send with a 3.115, 12% plus tax increase. Homeowners might be able to handle it, but our businesses have been through a very difficult year. It's not just a tax bill. It's kind of a message, that we're sending out. It has to do with the stability of the way we run our budget. Last year we had a rollback. And I would posit to you that perhaps we should have had a 3% increase last year. Put a little money into special funds, revenue. If I were a business and I'm going to look at moving to the city, I'm going to look at the stability of those tax rates. And you understand you have a business, so do I. And I see a 12.2% tax increase. Makes me think about maybe I'm better off on the other side of the bridge. So you got a balancing act ahead of you. I don't envy you this year. I'm not a borrow from Peter to pay Paul going into the hurricane fund to fund this. But I urge you to try and find an alternative. I know you have some tough choices ahead. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak? Don't be shy.
Hello, my name is Grace Reed from Sebastian City. First, I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Kilgore. I've watched a couple of the budget meetings, planning and zoning committee meetings, and those when they were presenting them to him, and I just got done this afternoon reading through all 180 plus pages. But like I've said before in these chambers, we moved here just a little over a year ago, and 30 years ago we lived here. At that time I rented, so the taxes didn't affect me with my rent, but they did affect the services that were provided to me. We moved back here because we really did love this city and we wanted to come back and be a part of it. Well, taxes don't want to increase. Nobody wants to see an increase in taxes, but sometimes, given the nature of what we're in right now with pandemics and hurricanes and just all kinds of things that are going on, it might need to happen. And yes, there's a lot of businesses that are struggling and it's going to affect them adversely and everything else, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about was that I did see several line items in there that are going to be somewhat unpopular to some people. But when you look at the other side, some of them are going over several years to take place. And they probably are needed for the functioning of this city in the future and to keep it the nice place that it is. It's going to grow. It might grow small, it might grow large, but it is going to grow. And you never know. Next year, we might be able to roll those taxes back again. But I am dead set against going into any reserves and run the risk of not being able to recover from some type of a disaster. So with that, that's really all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next person. Linda.
Linda Kenshin, Sebastian, Florida. I have to also advocate for the increase in taxes this year, which unfortunately no one likes to do. But because of COVID-19 and everything else this city's been through, you're going to have to protect everything that's been going on. And while 4.7% is not quite as bad as 12.2%, it doesn't allow for the things that you need to allow for, like lawsuits, raises. You're going to have to cut services sometimes, maybe. I don't think the city of Sebastian residents deserve to have that happen. And in my 30 years with the city, when I worked for him and doing budgets with Mr. Kilgore, I have never gotten a budget that had red marks that says, be cautious. So I know if there's a problem, we need to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person would like to speak. Ma'am.
Sharon Herman, Sebastian, Florida. I'm still new with all this financial stuff and everything for the city. I'm learning, but I am learning. But one of the things I do know is that if you run a city, you've got to run it like a business. And you can't afford not to have a reserve because you don't know what's coming down the line, especially in Florida when you've got hurricanes and things like that. No one wants tax increases. If you ask 100 people are going to say, no, I don't want my taxes to go up. But what we want and what we need as a city are not always the same thing. When you consider the chances of decreased state funds and the use caution that you put in red, I think I would have used more explanation points because I really think we're going to see a lot more decreases coming from the state. Again, we've got the potential undetermined amount of all these legal costs for all these cases that we've got going on. Potential for increase, you know, the city has insurance to cover the legal costs. But those insurances aren't for free. You know, your child has an accident, your insurance goes up. Okay, so we've got potential increased insurance costs, possible litigation costs, and then we've also got the cost of fixing the moratorium for all the chemical spraying because now we've got a little more that we have to do to take care of that and the canals and things like that. There's just a lot of undetermined costs. And I think if you try and go bare bones, you're going to try and come back to the people and say, hey, this isn't doing it. We need more money. And it's a lot harder to get more money than it is to say, hey, you're going to pay, what, $38 more this year or whatever. You know, get a little bit from everybody rather than trying to go here and there and try and get a lot. Thank you.
And the next person wants to come up, please.
Christopher Nunn, Sebastian, Florida. I would just like to say simply, we shouldn't touch our reserves. This is 2020. We have how many hurricanes running around out there now, how many possible storms. We can't afford to put ourselves in a city in a bad situation to make things good now. That doesn't mean we want a tax increase, but sometimes you have to deal with the reality at hand. Obviously, the legal costs, people have mentioned that we don't know what's going to happen. There are deductibles and things that have to pay with insurance policies, and insurance cost rises and such like that going up because they have had to provide a lot of attorneys to the city lately. So obviously there's cost that's going to happen. I just, please, don't touch our reserves. We don't want to put ourselves in that situation.
Thank you. Anyone else? Is there anyone on Zoom that's got their hand up?
No, sir, not at this time.
Good, thank you. Okay, council, we've got two resolutions, and my understanding is we have to treat them independently. So what I'd like to do now is begin council deliberation on Resolution 20-17, which is the millage rate. And Councilmember Hill, would you like to start that?
Well, certainly. Thank you, Mayor Dodd. And, you know, again, I'd also like to thank Ken Kilgore and Paul Carlisle for putting out an outstanding budget together, and thank all of the department heads who worked really hard to try to get this budget balanced. But I don't believe the budget is balanced at 2.9399. I don't believe it's balanced because I don't believe it covers the things that we're going to need to operate this community. The question is, what the recommendation to go to 2.9399 was based on what with all of those other outliers out there?
That was a bare bones balanced budget. We're required by statute to provide a balanced budget to the council. So without adding any unknowns in the budget, that's what the 2.9399 is. You're not bound by that. You have set a trim rate of 3.1514. You can go to that rate, but we produced a balanced budget based on that without anything. I will tell you, we're having a hard time filling positions in our lower scale positions, our maintenance worker positions, because of others paying more, contractors. Police department, the sheriff's department is offering a considerable pay raise, and I don't want to lose our officers to that. This is not threats. This is just things that we're looking at as we look at this different rate. You know, we have some of the best officers in the state, and we don't need to lose them to somebody else over a few dollars. But, you know, this is something council needs to determine when they make the decision on this.
So as far as staff is concerned, would you recommend 2.9399 or 3.1514?
My best recommendation for today would be the 3.1514.
Okay, so that would be the recommendation basically from staff?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, because that clears up a lot of the questions in here. A lot of people thought that staff recommended 2.9399, going forward, when in fact that 2.9399 is a balanced budget, but it doesn't add for anything else. In fact, I would suggest that the budget at 2.9399 actually reduces the level of service in the city.
There's a potential depending on if we get larger cuts in the state revenues.
Okay. All right,
we
great.
didn't anticipate.
So I'm the guy that's always up here beating the table to death, talking about no new taxes. I don't want to see another tax increase. I don't want to see us go up at all, right? I want rollback minus as much as we can possibly get. And often the fight that I fought up here has gotten us rollback minus. Most often it's gotten us rollback, but a lot of times it gets us rollback minus. Well, there are extraordinary times that we're dealing with right here. I mean, 2020, can anyone in the world remember a year like 2020? And I would suggest, especially in the city of Sebastian, can you remember a year like 2020? I sure can't. And I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never one time been an advocate for raising our taxes. Never. But again, these are extraordinary times. And I think that in order to be responsible stewards of this government, we have to pay for this government. Not passing a budget at 2.9399 does not allow for any increase for our employees. That's already been discussed. I believe it cuts into our level of service, and I don't think that's acceptable to the people. I don't think that the people in Sebastian want to see a lower level of service going forward. And then also I believe that we're going to have increased costs due to the parks and drainage being in disrepair because of some of the decisions that were made late last year. Some of those decisions that were made without any thoughts of how we were actually going to go forward and maintain the properties that we have in Sebastian. So I quite frankly believe that over the last year, we've seen a great reduction in the level of service in this community. Case in point, our drainage systems, when we get a rain event during one day and our streets flood out, I beg your pardon. So I've seen our streets flood before. Certainly I have, but when I'm driving through those floods and I'm looking down the drainage canals and I'm seeing all of that material growing up in those ditches, I know why that's there. It's because of the decisions we made last November. That's why that's there, and that's why those streets flooded as badly as they did. So we're going to have to pay more money to get those canals back in shape. And if you take pictures, you can walk over to any of our large canals, and you can see the growth that's taking place in them. As we speak, we went through and took a whole bunch of stuff out mechanically, and it's growing back in rapidly, and it continues to grow in. So we have no real plan in place to solve that. We need to get back on track, and I believe that soon we will get back on track. But it's going to cost money. So there's no provisions in this budget to do those things. Our parks, I believe, have fallen into disrepair to a point based on the knee-jerk reaction to completely stop spraying any chemicals on our parks, which help to maintain them. We took away fire ant treatments. We took away weed treatments. We took away a lot of things that help to maintain those parks and keep them beautiful and safe for our children. And so they're not as beautiful and safe for our children right now. And we need to get them back to where they need to be. Again, I'm the guy that's going to stand up here and fight to keep those taxes as low as possible. But today I'm making the same argument I've fought against year after year after year after year. And that is because I don't believe that the budget is balanced, not even close at 2.9399. And it would be incredibly irresponsible for us to pass that budget because of all of those reasons I've said, because the only option we would have as a government in order to function as a city would be to get into our reserves. And we're talking about getting into the reserves of over $300,000 out of our reserves. And then if we get into the reserves, and now this gets like quirky math here, but if we get into the reserves to pay for some of the things that we're going to need to do, like raises or some of the other necessary items, then next year we're going to have a budget that we're going to have more difficulty balancing because our baseline is going to be at a different spot. So, I mean, all of these things are incredibly important that we look into. So here's that argument that everyone always makes to me every year. And I'm always like, I don't care, $3 is a lot of damn money. And it is. So an average home of $200,000 is going to see an increase of about $3 per month. That's not cool. And it's not cool at all. Because that's just the city that may be doing that. And there could be some coming from other entities. Not cool. But is it necessary? I think it is. I think it is necessary that we do that. Now, the average non-exempt home is going to be about $8.75 a month, and I think that's a pretty large increase. And that's disappointing to me. But again, we fight to keep taxes as low as possible, but we also have to be responsible stewards of the product that we have here in the city of Sebastian and make sure that the residents get what they want and are willing to pay for it. I believe the only option here, Mayor Dodd, would be to go to a millage rate of 3.1514 tentatively at this meeting, because if in fact we go through negotiations with the unions and they come back and say, we don't want any increases, we're willing to work for nothing more, we may find that we don't need to go up that high. But at this point, I think it'd be irresponsible for us to do anything less.
Thank you, sir. Vice Mayor Baltic.
I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Hill on that. Because of the unknowns and because of the pandemic, I think we should go with the higher rate. Like he said, we can always go down.
All right. Okay, and I'm, I was listening to Councilmember Hill's arguments and thinking back to the last 3 budget meetings that I've been through, and he was 100% right. He was the most vocal person about going to rollback or even below rollback, and I agreed with him and voted with him on all 3 of those things. And we have, for 3 years in a row, been at rollback. One of those years we went below rollback. And I just don't, there's two things that, as I looked through this material on my own, and I was very happy the city manager qualified this information at the beginning, because as I looked through this material on my own, some people can infer that we're wanting to raise taxes because we're not managing the budget very well. In reality, the problem is that our state revenues are what's going to be decreasing, and we have no control over that. I'm not 100% sure that the level of state revenue reduction that we're anticipating is good enough. The state right now is reporting something in the neighborhood of a 21% reduction in revenue, and that's their early projections, which are always low. So I'm not so sure we're not going to get a larger amount of reduction in revenue from the state. But I agree 100% that we need to go to the 3.1514 in anticipation that we can at least try to balance the budget, and we're going to have in the next 6 months to the next 9 months, we're going to have some financial decisions we're going to be making as a council if the state does what I anticipate they might do and actually cut back on us more than we've seen them cut back. And I think that's going to be an important thing to go with. I also don't believe in impacting the reserves. They're there for a good reason, and we have to have them. If not, we're going to be like a lot of cities in Florida. The second time a hurricane hits us, people will wait 6 to 8 weeks for the stuff to be removed from their yard because we won't have the money to do it without somebody paying for it. So that's just not an acceptable level of service to the people we've got out there. So I'm also in favor of, at this hearing, setting 3.1514 in anticipation that if we can find something that tells us different between now and the next hearing, that we possibly could go back to the 2.9399. So thank you. Councilmember Paris.
I have to agree with Mr. Hill and yourself, Mayor Dodd. It just makes sense, and these are uncertain times, so that would be my consensus.
Thank you.
I agree with that, Rick.
All right. Councilmember Gilliams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few questions for the city manager and for the finance director. Maybe you can help me out and educate me a little. Just recently, we received Federal CARE Act money from the federal government. That amount, can you just refresh my memory how much that initial payment was?
It was just over $924,000.
$924,000 that we received for COVID-19?
Correct.
Okay, is that the first installment?
That's correct.
Okay. What's the next installment, and how much do we anticipate in total?
We don't have that number yet. It's $20 million to the county. They haven't decided how they're going to divide that up.
Does it sound like maybe $6 million in total to the city of Sebastian?
I would say probably 2 or 3.
2 or 3 million. So with anticipation of state shortfalls, we are getting government money from the feds, about 3 million. Now, I understand that that's not all going to our city. That's going to help the community. I understand that. But there is money coming in, correct?
That's correct, but it cannot be used to balance the budget. It cannot be used as budget shortfall funds. So those monies cannot be used to balance our budget by the COVID rules.
We did use it for employees, right?
Only that were COVID related.
COVID related, okay. So we anticipate $2 to $3 million from the feds coming in. That's COVID related. Can't use it to balance the budget. Let me ask you this. The franchise fees for the city, is that down or up?
we're anticipating it to be slightly above what, in our budget, current budget, we are anticipating it to be slightly above, maybe 3 or 4% above this year, but those are projections. And that's how we have it in the budget. If it comes in less, then that's an issue for the budget. But right now, I believe, Ken, you have it at 3 or 4%.
Approximately 62,000, Mr. Kilgore? Does that sound right? About 62,000 projected franchise fees?
That is roughly the number, yes.
Okay. On the extra ad valorem taxes, is that showing a negative or a positive, Mr. Kilgore? The projected ad valorem taxes, you projecting a negative or a positive?
Projected taxes would be a positive increase.
Yes, it's going to be approximately 262,000 extra in ad valorem taxes, correct?
Are you asking about the 3.154 versus the 2.9399?
Yeah, I'm looking at the budget that he's proposing, correct, for this year, and that's under the assumption it's 3.14?
No, it's 2.9,
Or is it 2.9?
2.9.
That's the 4% increase,
That's
correct?
4.66 increase.
Okay, so
About 100,000 of that is from the growth,
97,000.
the additions to the roll.
growth, a lot of new building permits, more houses being built, right?
The balance will be reassessments.
Okay, so we're projecting 262,000 there, franchise fee 62,000. How about utility service tax? Are we projecting a positive there?
A slight increase on the electric utility taxes, it's about 100,000.
I'm looking at 458,000 according to the book that I have here. Utility service tax, 458,000.
That's different than the increase.
From the previous budget from last year. I see that the state revenue is down. Your projections, I see that's about 94,000. Charge for services that we're charging in the community is up 104,000. So total revenues and transfers, I'm seeing $538,000. I'm just going by the budget that I'm looking at. I can tell you where I'm finding it, but I don't want to belabor that too long. Mr. City Manager, in your budget, is your budget going up for your department?
My budget's pretty much flat. There's no increases.
No increases, because I'm showing you your budget going up 17,000 projected.
That's some reclassification and some help for Manny. That's reflected in my budget, not his budget.
I see that the clerk reduced her budget 11,000. You know, I listened to the people come up and speak tonight. John, and I thank John for participating in our government and coming to the meetings. Mrs. Reed, that's always in here. And I listened to the messages that they were putting out. Not everybody gets to speak. And it's about the message, John said. The message that we're sending out to our community, okay? I see increases in revenue, okay? I see a $5 million reserve, okay? I'm just telling you what I see. And the message that we're sending to our taxpayers of this community, 12% increase, we can't find where we can trim our budget and do a balanced budget at the 2.9 instead of the 3.14. I understand Mrs. Kitchen made a remark about lawsuits. Well, that's part of business. I understand that. I'm not sure if she owns any real estate in the community, but 13%, 12%, 13%, when you own real estate and you're in business, it's a big number. So, you know, for Jim Hill and the mayor, who've been up here before, Jim's been here 20 years, and I respect what Jim has to say, because he's done these budgets many and many times. He knows this budget like the back of his, he should. This is my first go-around really diving into it and trying to understand the different enterprise funds and, you know, where we get all our revenue, where do we get all our state monies, and I'm a little perturbed that with all that experience, we could not figure out a way not to raise taxes 12.2%. When in fact, when I watched the short time that I'm here, and who knows, I may be here longer, I may not, but I watch contracts, $8 million garages going out without doing workshops, not figuring out a way to bring it in and have a meeting and figure out how can we bring this thing and cut. In fact, I watched, while I'm here, contracts go out for $500,000 for a set of blueprints when I know, in fact, I've hired engineers and architects, and I looked at those blueprints, and I see fleecing of Sebastian. I'm just telling you what I see. I see $350,000 in overage on a set of blueprints. And then I see this tax bill, and I say, wow. Now, I'll be happy to debate anybody anytime they want to go over those blueprints, because I've got the files, and I spent a lot of time doing public records requests, and I want to thank the clerk for providing me everything that I needed to review. And I was willing to give my seat up. If they were to put that out to bid, I would have proved to you that those blueprints would have came in under $200,000. I would have just walked out of here and said, I was wrong, I don't deserve to be up here. But nobody took me up on it. Nobody took me up on it because they knew that I was correct. And I'll tell you what I find very disturbing also, Mr. Mayor. When we have contractors who get letters of recommendations working at our airport, coming in under budget, and he gets looked over, and we give contracts out to some people on the West Coast and not to our local contractors here on the East Coast. I find that disturbing, and then I'm going to go to the taxpayer and I'm going to say, we got to raise your taxes. I'm sorry, we just don't have enough money. We can't figure out how to pay the additional wages to our employees, which, you know, I don't want to lose employees, but I think that if we were a little more frugal with the money, I think we could have gave the employees a 2-3% cost of living increase as well as a merit pay, if we were frugal. I just don't, you know, listen, I'm just telling you what I see. This is my opinion, mine alone, but when I see $300,000 worth of sugar sand given out, just given away, you can laugh all you want. It's not accounted for. And I'm going by Mr. Almin's remarks, excuse me. I sat here and I listened to you guys speak, and I never interrupted you. Now, please, be professional, Mrs. Irvin.
Councilmember Gilliams.
Mr. Mayor, get the
I'm going to interrupt
control.
you. I'm going to interrupt you because we're talking about the millage rate,
Well,
and you're getting way out of line.
I'm telling you what I see here.
Okay,
when in fact, when we're not held
please?
accountable as stewards of the taxpayers' money, and we're giving away money like that, that tells me we got plenty of money. So let me finish, because I want to drill home a point here. That's the whole purpose of this. I want to drill home a point. So when we have all this extra money, and then we have the money for the rainy day, the $5 million sitting in for the rainy day. Well, when is the rainy day? When is, now I know we've had claims where we had to put money out for after hurricanes. I understand that. And I think if we look at and dive into those numbers, we're going to average about 3.5 million every time, give or take. We never utilize the whole 5 million. And I can verify that. I can double check. But that's money that gets reimbursed back to us through FEMA. Okay? This is a virus that happens maybe once every 100 years of this magnitude. And we decide, Mr. City Manager, that we're going to go ahead and we're going to raise everybody's taxes 12 to 13%, when in fact we have all this money coming in from the federal government, CARES Act money. We got additional revenue, I just pointed out in the budget, coming in. But we're going to have the audacity to ask the taxpayers of this community when we're not stewards of their money and looking over it. This is just my opinion. I'm sorry if you don't agree with me. They talked about the stormwater. One of the council members said, well, my friend, you've been here 20 years. Where's the master plan for the stormwater drainage? We got it started this year, and we need it. And I'm okay spending $200,000 or whatever it is, $1 million, Mr. City Manager, because you're right. You need that to get grant money. You need to have a master plan, and I commend you for doing that. But that should have been done 20 years ago. Thank God you're here now, because how much longer would we have to wait and deal with all the floods in our community and our broken down canal walls that I've been, one side, because it was politically connected, $5 million, the walls got done overnight. Nobody said anything. But then when it came to finish up the Highlands, it never gets done. So I'm happy to see that in the budget, Mr. City Manager. But I think we need to sharpen our pencils. I don't think the message we want to send to this community, I am not in favor of raising our taxes in this community 12 to 13%, whatever the number is. 12.2, 3.15 on the trim, on the millage rate. That to me is irresponsible. And, you know, being up here less than a year, if I was up here 15 years, 20 years, I would know where to cut the budget. And I think, Mr. City Manager, I think you need to get with your department heads and you need to have a meeting with them and send a message that we have to make cuts. If we cannot balance the budget at the 2.9 with a 4% increase and find money for our employees, the unions, to make sure that they get a decent cost of living and maybe a small little merit. There are people out there that are not going to have a job, they're not going to have a home, they're not going to be able to pay their mortgage, they're not going to be able to pay their rent, and guess what? We have not seen the last of this virus. The second coming of it is right around the corner. The colleges are back up and running. The kids are there, they're spreading, they're going to bring it home. And we need to send a message. I think we're very sloppy. That's just my opinion. I am not voting for a tax increase. I'd be happy to sit down, but I don't want to overstep my boundary. I work as a consensus up here with the board, and obviously I see it's 4-1. I can read the writing on the wall that they want the tax increase. I think the mayor, Dodge, should not increase our taxes because he's been here long enough and Jim Hill's been here long enough, and they should find a way to cut this budget. Now, I'll be happy to do a workshop and call a special meeting before the September 28th. Is that the next budget hearing, Ms. Kildo, September 28th? Because, I don't know, maybe I won't be here, maybe I will be here. We don't know that yet. But
for sure,
I would be happy to do a workshop and go line item by line item and figure out which departments and see which departments are willing to go through their budget and cut. And that's the message that we need to send. So, in closing.
Are you done?
I'm almost done.
Okay.
In closing, I would really have liked to see 0% increase in taxes. I would like to have seen the rollback all the way. And I think it can be done. If you put your mind to it, Mr. City Manager, I think you can figure out where you can balance your budget, make up the $300,000-$400,000 that you're looking for, maybe more because now it's rollback. Even if you go to the 2.9, I think that you have enough revenue coming in, and the feds have given us extra money, and we can tap into our reserves. And the way we're spending money around here, we can hit those numbers. And with that, I turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Can I I want to say something before I recognize you if I can. Okay, go ahead. What are you going to make a motion?
I am.
Okay, make a motion, then I'll say what I'm going to say.
Mayor Dodd, I'd make a motion to consider resolution number R-20-17 and approve it at a tentative millage rate of 3.1514 for the calendar year of 2020.
And would you include in that 3.1514, which is a 12.2%?
I would indeed.
Above, yeah.
And then, yes, I would do that.
Okay, and I'll second that motion.
All right, and I will, hopefully I could get the floor when you're finished.
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Okay.
Briefly.
I just have to address the things that Councilmember Gilliam said. As usual, he spins around in a lot of circles. The TV cameras left before he started talking. I thought he wouldn't spend so much time, but.
Now, Mr. Mayor, is that nice?
Yeah, no, it wasn't nice.
I didn't make comments like
I'm sorry. I have to apologize to you. I shouldn't have said that.
Apology. Let's show leadership, Mr. Mayor. You are the mayor, right?
I believe I do that.
Okay. Would you please?
So
thank you.
First of all this stuff he's talking about is not money that we can use in the general fund. We can't take CARES Act money and use that to shore up our general fund. We can't take money from the the discretionary sales tax fund that's going to be used to do a contract out at the airport, or we can't take money from those things that are going to be used to run sewer services out at the airport. We can't take those funds and drop them into our general fund. if anybody who understands budgets takes a look at the budget, there's only one way that we can reduce this general fund, and that's to lay off staff. I mean, we can play some games. We can not buy a couple of reams of paper. We can maybe not buy a computer or two. But the big line items, the police cars, they don't come out of general fund. Those things don't, I mean, we don't pay for that kind of stuff out of this general fund. The reason that we're in such trouble in this general fund is that we have no choice but cut services if we don't raise the revenue that we need to continue to operate as a city. And none of the things that he was talking about money, are meaningful when it comes to that. You're not going to, the worst thing that this city could do because of COVID-19, which in one breath he says is small and it's going away, and the next breath he says it's coming back in November, the worst thing that we could do as a result of COVID-19 is misinterpret the fact that the state's going to give us less money than we are getting from them. And then we end up into our reserves, and then we end up next year having to raise taxes in order to generate reserves. We're getting ourselves in a large mess if we do that. We have to keep this city operational. We have some major things that the city has to accomplish, and if we stop the city from accomplishing those, then the city basically dies, and we can't allow that to happen. So I'm in full support of Mr. Hill's resolution, and we'll vote for it.
Yes, and I will vote for it as well, and I would just make a suggestion that there seems to be some confusion as to where the budget comes from. The city council sets what it is we want, and we believe the citizens of this community want, and what we require for the city, and the city manager produces a budget based upon our recommendations. City manager's not wanting or getting, or the question of, I know you put that in there and you're going to put this in there. Those things that are put in this budget are put in this budget specifically because this city council has required them to be in the budget in order to provide the level of service for this community. So at that, I fully support this as well.
Okay, unless there's any other conversation.
Excuse me, he had 2 chances to speak. I'd like to respond, please.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So let the record reflect that I did watch the budget meetings with Chairman Larry Napier, and I respect Chairman Larry Napier. Larry used to handle finances out in Fellsmere. He's retired, and he agrees that we should not be raising taxes. Now, this is from our chairman, who's very frugal, who knows our budget, who's been watching our budget for 30 years. And I have a lot of respect for Larry Napier in this community. And when he says we should not be raising taxes and we can find a better way to balance the budget, I would listen to Larry. I really would, because he's got so much grant money for the city of Fellsmere and block money by utilizing creative ways of doing his budget out there. And call Larry Napier. He'll probably hate me saying this, but he's a smart guy, and he's the chair of our budget committee. And I agree with Larry. Thank you.
And 4 other individuals on that committee who are equal on that committee agrees with us. So it's a 4-to-1 vote to pass the millage as we're doing this evening, hopefully.
Yeah. And Larry's my appointee to the committee, and I trust Larry, and I appreciate his knowledge a gigantic amount. But once again, the statement that you made about grant money, you don't get grant money to buy paper. You get grant money to do projects, like put sewer lines out into the river. You can't cover your general fund with grant money. It's a matter of a very fine line of making statements that are not true to justify something that doesn't apply. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Gilliams?
No on raising the city of Sebastian's taxes at this time. No, Mr. Mayor. No, Jim Hill.
Councilmember Hill?
Well, I say yes.
Councilmember Paris?
I understand this is tentative and can be changed. Am I correct?
We will have a second hearing on the 28th. We'll set that date at the end of this meeting.
All right, I'll say aye.
Mayor Dodd?
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Motti?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, now we're on to resolution number 20-18, which is a tentative budget transmittal. This resolution will transmit the budget that was submitted by the city manager. The actual detailed copy of this budget was submitted on June 24th, right? Big thick book. People had an opportunity to look at it. There are summarizations of it, I believe, in this packet a little bit, in the agenda packet. So Councilmember Hill, or Councilmember Gilliams, would you like to start this comment?
Sure. Once again, Mr. Mayor, now that we're transmitting the budget and we've already set the hearing for the second go-around on September 28th, I'm hoping that the community comes out when we have to, this has to be run through again, and they can tell you exactly how they feel. I'm sure that a lot of people don't realize that their taxes and the budget's going to go up as well as their taxes. Once again, I reiterate to our city manager to please call for a staff meeting with your department heads and look for a way where you can send the correct message to this community that we're not going to raise your taxes 12 to 13%. We're going to try to do it at 4.7, and we're going to balance the budget at the same time, and we'll be able to do that with the $5 million in reserves that you have, as well as the additional funds that are coming in. And by the way, the governor did open up a lot of businesses. So I understand there's going to be a shortfall in state revenue, and I think Ken's projected some of those numbers in his paperwork. It's going to be for a few months. It's not going to get to the point where we will not be able to handle this. We need to send the message that during hard times, we need to crunch the numbers, we need to cut back, and we need to figure out a way and send the correct message. Cost of living is only 3 to 4%. The consumer price index is not that high. So to be raising people's taxes is just unheard of at 13%, 12.2. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Paris.
I have no comment.
Okay, how many meetings did you have in preparation of this budget with your staff?
Some of them were 2, some of them were 3, depending on the complexity. And then
with each staff member?
With each department head. And we did cut, and we trimmed, and we cut them back, some of them below what they had last year. Yeah. So we've met with them, and as you mentioned, you're talking about instead of $1,000 for office supplies, we cut it to $800. These are things that we've met with and we've talked with. We've cut the police budgets, training down to minimal required training. I mean, we have hammered on this budget. I've been doing budgets in municipal government for a number of years, and I am one of the most frugal people you'll ever see. I'm probably the only one that's more frugal than Ken when it comes to spending city tax dollars. And I will tell you that I have gone over this budget and over this budget with Ken, and Ken is a wizard of these budgets and trying to figure out ways to look at different ways of moving funding around. I can tell you without a doubt this budget is tight, as it is.
I agree with that. I've gone through this monstrous thing here in a lot of detail and had several conversations with the city manager about it. And it's always possible to argue that you can cut something. I mean, and sure, maybe we can cut $100 here and $50 there and $75 there, but we don't accomplish anything by doing that. We have to allow the city manager to run the city, and we have to allow the city to operate. So as you go through it, it's relatively easy. I've been doing budgets for a long time from an executive management point of view, and it's really easy for an executive management person to say to somebody, cut $800 out of that paper budget. And then he turns around 2 weeks later and says, make me copies. And you go, I don't have any paper to make copies on. Well, why don't you have any paper? You're not doing your job. And that's the kind of riffraff and garbage that seems to come about sometimes when people who should not be micromanage. And so I'm perfectly happy with the budget. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm never perfectly happy with anything, but I'm very happy with the budget. Vice Mayor Malte.
I can go along with the budget that the city manager put up.
Thank you. Councilmember Hill.
No, I agree with everything you said, Mayor Dodd. I appreciate the hard work from Ken. And Paul, as always, I've gone through this. Obviously, me being the don't ever raise taxes guy, it's very difficult for me to do this, but I know it's better for the city of Sebastian. And even if it's not good for me, it's good for the city of Sebastian, so that's what we should do. Therefore, I would make a motion to approve resolution number R-20-18, set the tentative budget.
I'll second that motion. We have a motion and a second. Any other conversation?
Does that need to include the next day?
That'll come later, but you do have to have public comment.
So do we have to announce today when the?
You will do that later on in the
All right,
agenda.
very
Yeah,
good.
that's the next
All right,
thing on
motion
the
stands.
line.
We've already
Back of
we've
that
already had
front
public
page.
input,
Yeah,
so we're good.
yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so, let's have a roll call on Councilmember Hill's motion to approve R-20-18, seconded by myself.
Okay, Councilmember Hill,
Yes.
Councilmember Paris,
Yes.
Mayor Dodd,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Motti,
Yes.
and Councilmember Gilliam.
No on raising taxes, 12%, no.
Okay, item G on the agenda. And this will be open for public input if anyone wants to come forward and speak on this. I'm going to announce that the final public hearing on the millage and budget is to be held on Monday, September 28th, 2020, at a special council meeting at 6 p.m. in the chambers. Would anyone from the public like to address this? Anyone on Zoom? All right, seeing none. I don't know that that's a motion required on that.
No.
No.
Just
So, for anybody who wants to do it, if you're interested in looking at the details, it's on the website. You can get to the detailed budget if you want to look at it. And we will meet on September 28th at 6 p.m. in the chambers for our final review and to establish the final millage rate and the budget. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
No, sir.
Like a motion to adjourn, if I may get one.
Even though I don't believe we need to do it.
I know.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'm trying to placate Manny.
Well, he doesn't need to be placated, but I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second on that? We're adjourned.